Okay, let's review the article, Why is Bad Parenting Criminogenic by Univer, Cullen, and Agnew. So the authors first are looking at bad parenting from two competing but different theories, general theory of crime and social learning. So this basically are the theories that we've just gone over in this chapter. They review general theory of crime, which is also low self-control theory, and parenting. And the main premise for general theory is low self-control, which results from ineffective parenting by the parent failing to monitor or track child's behavior, the parent failing to recognize deviant behavior when it occurs, and the erratic or excessive punishment of deviant behavior. So one time they may punish, the other time they may ignore it, or they overly punish behavior. So in their theory, what is needed is strong attachment of parents to child, which is a prerequisite of what they consider effective parenting. And if it's not there, then the child will not have self-control. So they're basically saying that it's an innate trait of low self-control, and it's up to the parents to basically teach what is self-control. Parents who fail to make the effort to instill these internal controls then leads to self-control and misconduct. Differential association and social learning theory see that there's different motivations for crime across individuals. The major source of variation comes from definitions and attitudes that are favorable to crime. And so when they talk about bad parenting as being ineffective, it's where parents model and reinforce deviant behavior. They might model aggressive behavior by punishing in a very coercive way. And the parents have a set of attitudes, standards, and norms that are favorable to aggressive and deviant behavior. So the authors test both these theories on 6 middle schools. So they have over 3,000 participants, 6th through 8th grade. And if we look at the sample, almost half are non-white. More than half receive a free or reduced lunch, which lets you know that that they come from lower income families. 50% are male. 19.6, so 20% of the sample has IEPs, which are for kids that have been diagnosed with areas that could inhibit their education, like ADD, dyslexia, ADHD. So it really calls in for kind of a special learning program. They did have a dropout rate of 1.9%. Remember, it's 6th through 8th grade. But the average age of the sample was 12 and a half years. So the actual, when we looked at the whole population, it was very similar to the control group. So then it's okay to make assumptions because they're relatively the same. So they measured using 3 different scales: general delinquency scale, violent crime scale, and the nonviolent crime scale. And the dependent variables they were looking at were ineffective parenting, coercive parenting, parental monitoring, inconsistent punishment, parental reinforcement of aggression, and then they added the 2 what they call psychosocial variables, low self-control and aggressive attitude scales. And then they controlled for ADHD, intact families, meaning that the family unit was together. SES is social economic status, family conflict. So you could have an intact family that fights a lot. The gender of the child, race, and age. So the results show that low self-control is related to ineffective parenting. Low self-control use had parents that were more likely to reinforce aggression by giving in when the child was angry. In other words, instead of disciplining the child, they just let the child get away with their angry bursts. So if the child takes away a toy from a sibling, the parents ignore the behavior and allow the aggression to continue. Parents did not closely monitor their child's behavior, And then it was related to 5 control variables: the federally funded lunch, being male, ADHD, having family conduct, and less likely to live in an intact family. Model 2 then looks at social learning and aggressive attitudes, and this is also influenced by ineffective parenting. Parents reinforce youth aggression by giving in again, we just discussed, inconsistent or coercive punishment, and related again to 5 control variables. The child was older, male, federally funded, exposed to family conduct, and less likely to live in intact home. So you can see that both low self-control and aggressive attitudes are important and overlap. So when they looked at low self-control theory itself, or general theory of crime, and looked at the 3 propositions Gottfredson and Hershey put out, low self-control should directly influence delinquent behavior. Yes, it did. Low self-control should entirely mediate the effects of ineffective parenting and control measures, which means that that should be the dominant characteristic, but that was not supported. And low self-control should similarly affect the delinquency measures, like violent versus property crimes, and that was supported as well. When we look at social learning, the results also supported social learning. It predicted that aggressive attitudes should significantly predict deviancy, which it did. It supported parental monitoring and involvement, helped to reduce these aggressive attitudes. Parental reinforcement of aggression, though, was strong, meaning that the aggressive attitudes were encouraged or ignored. And then coercive parenting or punishment techniques directly affected delinquency measures. So when we compare low self-control to aggressive attitude scale was more strongly related to general delinquency and violent crimes than low self-control. So if we were ranking, we would rank aggressive attitudes before low self-control, which is really what Wright et al. Said. If you have early aggression, that tends to follow you through the developmental stages all the way through adulthood. If traits are combined, which means low self-control and aggressive, you see higher level of delinquency. Both theories have overlapping variables, so the belief that these are 2 separate theories is invalid. Ultimately, when you think about control theories, and they're talking about ineffective parenting and low self-control, the thing that's needed is parents to be involved to teach their child to internalize self-control, which is really social learning. So it's one of the things that control theorists have attempted so much to separate themselves from these other theories. But as you can see, control theory really is a different way of saying social learning theory. One of the things that they found is ineffective parenting influenced both level of internal control, which is self-control, and aggressive attitudes. Bad parenting produces both of them, both low self-control and aggressive attitudes. And bad parenting produces multiple criminogenic risk factors. So ultimately, what the article really is concluding is that bad parenting leads to criminogenic risk factors, which leads to crime. But at the end, then they put in a little slam of control theory, saying it's limited in 2 ways. First of all, it ignores psychological findings linking social learning to crime, because really teaching your kids to control their behavior is social learning. And second, that their assumption about human nature is just an assumption. So they assume that if we don't have control, everybody's going to commit crime because they want immediate gratification. Is this really part of human nature? And it's just an assumption on their part. So ultimately, bad parents do help create deviant behavior.